Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've sat and listened to this today and the interesting issues of how we do legislation and how we come about it in this committee and what amendments and what amendments are good and what amendments are bad. I've sat for 18 months. Most of that is ranking member, and I have heard Republican amendments referred to on many occasions as stupid or foolish or other things. And I go back to something because I know my friends on the other side of the aisle, including my gentleman from Louisiana who we've worked on many things before, Ms. Bass and others. We've worked on stuff before. The gentleman from New York. Bills that get into law make a difference. Bills that simply get talked about in committee are simply for sound bites for those cameras up there. So the reason it was brought up just a little bit ago is why there was not a lot of discussion between many of us on how we could get this bill done. I just simply go back to the First Step Act. We did a lot of stuff for several years. I agree with you. This is a very much of a needy time. We've actually been on this committee, and for some of us, including Mr. Richmond and others, we were in Houston, we were in Detroit, we were in other places on a police working group under the previous Congress. And we worked and we heard some of these ideas. Should have some been moved on faster? Yes. But we haven't had the chance to until now, until the tragedy of a murder in Minneapolis. And yes, there is somebody on this side, and many of us on this side, and in fact, most all of us, who cannot bear the thought of what's happening there, and we want to get it fixed. But also, it is not unfair to say that there are some things that we would like. Now, there may be some amendments I vote for, there's some amendments I may not vote for, but that's a committee process. But to simply say, vote it and move on is not being honest with the American people. You don't pass laws that way. The Senate has got a say in this, and they happen to be controlled by Republicans. The president has a say in this. He will, and we have a say. And one of the things is not that we have to do anything to fix with them, but let's at least find bigger issues to find, and we can weed those out. Because when I read this bill, you know what will never happen here, and I'm from the state legislature perspective, there are parts in this bill I would love for us to have detailed discussion of, because I'm saying, why did we use this word? It's too broad. It's going to get misinterpreted, and it's going to actually hurt people. It's going to bind our police officers instead of help our police. It's going to take our communities and get them frustrated because they said, this bill helps me, and it actually doesn't. But we're not doing that. And you did a great job just a second ago talking about it, and I appreciate it. And I'm just bringing it up. That let's go back to something bigger. The amendment is fine. It's from the Ms. Rethon, and we're going to look at it. But to simply say that let's pass this bill because we got to do something, fine. But then let's also remember as we look forward that there's going to be a time when we're going to have to conference this if we truly want it passed. If we truly want the president in the Oval Office of the Rose Garden to sign this, we're going to have to come together. And that means that, as just like the gentleman said, I would have loved to have seen more things in the First Step Act. But guess what? I couldn't get it. You know why? A lot of times because my Democratic colleagues couldn't get there, and I had Republican colleagues who couldn't get there. But we kept negotiating. The gentleman from New York was outstanding in that. You and others were outstanding in that. Let's begin to understand this process now, that this is how we're supposed to get it. What we have just heard. And I've heard this before just a few moments ago. Are we not hearing the voices of those in the streets? Yes, we're hearing the voices of those in the streets. Because I'll remind you, I also had voices for those who were incarcerated, and nobody cared. Nobody was listening to the ones who were shackled while they were giving birth. But it took members looking at it from both sides of the aisle and having a discussion and debate in committee and outside of committee that actually made a difference. I understand passion. As many of you know, and I've said it before, I understand it from sort of both sides. I've been a defense attorney, I've been a prosecutor, but I'm a son of a state trooper. And I watched him come home after having battles and having confrontations that broke his heart. But when we understand this and we start talking about participation in this committee means that when amendments come up, you debate them, you vote them up and down, just like a bill. And was said just a few moments ago by the gentlelady from Washington State, mental health issues. You described several events of mental health. I remember when we actually passed a bill in this committee and we actually worked together because we passed it on suspension, and it was the Comprehensive Mental Health and Criminal Justice Act. When we actually gave money and did grants so that federal officers and others could train state officers on how to identify mental health conditions with those that they come in contact without immediately going to, it's a criminal act or belligerency or something else. They're actually able to do their job. So let's work through this. You may disagree with amendments, I may disagree with amendments, but also in the end of the day, if you want this to truly be, it will not happen in this room. It starts in this room, but it doesn't finish in this room. You got to have the Senate, you got to have a three-pronged chair here doing it. And I'm willing to work on this because I've been working on it long before we ever got to here. And the folks on the other side of the aisle know that. In fact, if you don't believe it, just go to Georgia. I'm criticized for it regularly.
So get over it. Let's get this thing done. Let's get something that works and then move on so that the American people can finally say, Congress did their job. I yield back.